Dr. Jerome developed his practice to specifically care for those on the margins who were abandoned, lost, or misunderstood in the healthcare arena. Like he once was. Now, he leads his practice with one of his greatest realizations that our minds, bodies, and souls are far more bent towards recovery than we ever imagined. And that's really one of the things that drew me to your work is the combination of mind, body, and soul. And that's something for me, it has been newer. And I'm excited to learn how that all gets put together for us individually and as a pair. Now, in conjunction with Thrive Neural Health, he's integrated his learnings in neurology with the traditional Enneagram to create the brain-based Enneagram. That's why you were.
Can you say that 5 times?
That's why you were nervous. She took a deep breath before we got on. She was nervous. I was going to mess this up.
That's a tough little statement.
Yeah. Now listen, this is the very first book on neuroscience of the Enneagram. If you're not yet familiar with the Enneagram tool, is a system of personality typing that describes patterns in how we interpret the world and manage our emotions given our type. There are 9 types. We'll get into all of that later on. It helps us identify both our strengths and limitations, as well as providing guidance on how we may develop our capacity beyond them. Dr. Jerome also does extensive work with couples. That's why my wife, Peyton, is here, this lovely lady. She's joining us today. Now, listen, this is going to be a little bit of relationship. It's going to be a little bit of Enneagram. It's going to be a little bit of Sidney Crosby. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. So anyway, without further ado, Dr. Jerome.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. It's always so fun to meet people in different spaces, and my history has been so convoluted. I'm originally an immigrant kid from South Africa by way of Zaire. My family came to the States on asylum status as refugees in the early 90s to, the reasonable expectation of Northeast Tennessee from Zaire. It's a normal change for most people, I think. Not at all, but it's always fascinating to be able to get on a podcast or a call with somebody and see how much life has happened over the last few decades. And for you to just share what you just shared and me think 10 years ago, if somebody had said I was going to be on a podcast talking about the neuroscience of the Enneagram and relationships and some guy named Sidney Crosby, I would have been very confused. So it's really fascinating to see how the world kind of works and where things go. So I appreciate you having me on. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. And as we were talking offline, like we'll just kind of we're going to give a little history, a little bit of your history. We're going to talk Enneagram, obviously. And though I'm the quote unquote host, like obviously Peyton, anything that sparks your interest, fire away. And talk to us a little bit about how, you get into the Enneagram eventually, but your background was in neurology. And I mean, when we were talking last week, there was a number of things that you were doing that I had a hard time spelling. So can you give us a little bit of like what your call was to those things and then how it maybe changed?
Yeah. The funny thing is I always tell everybody I only became a doctor because I couldn't find a good one. Yeah, I was a patient. I've been a patient for 22 years. My undergrad is actually in digital animation, special effects production. And I used to do music full time with my brothers. So, when you go to the high school guidance counselor and they go, okay, here's your career track. They don't go digital animation, film, music, neuroscience, right? It's not the normal it's not the normal segues. But I started having really, really intense migraines at 17. A couple of years, my dad passed when I was a freshman in high school at 14. And through a lot, 9 specialists, 21 specialists over 9 years, over $100,000 as a newly married couple, to get a diagnosis for, a neurological issue that once we had the name of it, no one knew what to do with it other than a pretty intense surgery and a pretty aggressive, pain medication regimen. And my tolerance for medication is really, really high, which is great when you want to have some whiskey or wine, because I can have 8 shots of espresso and not feel it, which is probably not great for my adrenals. But it helps when you want to have a little, a little wine or something else. But the problem is when you're in intense pain and you just really process pain medication really well, it leaves you with a pretty short list of things that are pretty intense. And the surgery I have what's called a Chiari malformation, as well as some compression on all 4 sides of my brainstem due to some brain damage. I was run over by a car when I was 8. had 2 concussions when I was in high school, and run over by a car on foot. Had 2 concussions in high school and hit by 2 drunk drivers by the time I was 21. So my body and my head and my brain had been through some things. And long story short, started averaging at 17. By the time I got to 21, 22, I was averaging 100 full-blown migraines per calendar year and about 200 to 225 headaches outside of those migraines. So it averaged about 2 to 3 weeks without a headache during a calendar year. And when we got the diagnosis, what ended up happening was the clinicians that we saw were incredible people. But at the end of the day, they were like, we have the option to give you a pretty aggressive brain and spine surgery at the same time called the decompression surgery, or we can pretty heavily medicate you because your tolerance is super high. And when both of those didn't really feel like viable options as a 26-year-old, you start looking at all these other places. And honestly, what ended up happening, Gal, is I was like, I feel like there's so much that the traditional community offers in terms of understanding and clinical complexity, but not really in wellness and rehab and alternative kind of wholeness. And then the alternative community is super good at rehab and wellness, but they don't really like taking on complex cases.
Mhm.
So what happens to the person like me who gets into the medical purgatory of being pinball between everybody who doesn't want to treat you? Because you want to get better, and the alternative community doesn't really take complex, and then you're really complex and somebody understands you, but they don't really have any way to do that without really introducing some pretty invasive or pretty aggressive techniques. So I ended up going to school and getting a doctorate in chiropractic as my primary degree. And then after that, got a lot of, or during the chiropractic and afterwards, got a lot of postgraduate work in neurology. Ended up getting board certified. I'm one of 13 people in Georgia and the only person in Atlanta inside the perimeter that's board certified in functional neurology, which is kind of like being a personal trainer for the brain. It's like if you take a chiropractor, a physical therapist, an occupational therapist, a neurologist, and then you put them into a blender. That's kind of what we do as functional neurology. It's like a personal trainer.
Awesome.
And then I ended up getting tons of other kind of extra training and fellowships in childhood neurological developmental disorders, traumatic brain injury, vestibular rehabilitation, concussion, movement disorder, all sorts of different things. Because really what it turned out was I'm just good at sitting in a class for an extended period of time. Unlike my twin brother, who's not, he's like, he wouldn't last in a classroom. So I took that and ran with it. But what it really means is I just wanted to get into a situation, honestly, where I would minimize the number of times where I looked at somebody and said, I don't know what's going on and I don't know what to do because I have a lot of experience with that over the last 20 years, 2 decades. So I just became a doctor because I couldn't find one that knew how to work with me in conjunction and partner with the goals that I had of not pursuing either drugs or surgery or alternative approaches that loved the rehab but didn't love the complexity.
Well, that's quite a path, and it's I do love the stories that this hardship, which is maybe a bit of an understatement of what you were enduring, created this path towards learning, understanding to heal yourself, and now you've been able to bring that medicine to that that Venn diagram that's not being treated. So
Right.
that's pretty special. How long have you been kind of in practice?
So I was licensed in 2014. That's when I officially got licensed, but I was fortunate enough to mentor with the guy who created the field of functional neurology, the one who originally worked with Sidney Crosby. So I've been in this world for about 11 years, but in license and private practice for the last 5.5.
Right. Yeah, I was going to ask, like, dude, you must be really good at school because that's a lot of freaking work. But is that it? You like it? That's your kind of type is you can pull out information and sit and consume and.
Well, interestingly enough, I think this is where we'll get into the conversation of motivation versus natural inclination. I think if you're motivated by something, you're willing to go through a lot of hell for it. When we talk about Enneagram spaces, my lowest number, most people actually think I'm a 5, which is the researcher and the investigator. It's what most people think of when they think of science.
Yeah.
But 5 is actually my lowest number.
Come on.
Oh, interesting.
So sitting with data and sitting with a lot of information is actually pretty fatiguing for me. Just a means to an end. I was more willing to deal with the challenge because I'm doing close to 530 credits in 5 years. I mean, if you do the math, that's a lot of school in 5 years. I went year round, and nights and weekends in conjunction with a full doctorate at the same time. And it wasn't really that I felt comfortable with that. It was a means to an end for me.
You're inspired. I like to say that's like just true inspiration. Like I'm
Yeah.
getting there. Like keep sending me the information. Now, how did you tip into the Enneagram space?
So, man, I had a really good friend of mine who I will both always name and more as a curse than anything because he's affected my life so deeply in terms of burying me in this world. But it's I say it with love, but it's also partially a curse. His name is Sean Champ Smith, and he lives in Spain. He's an incredible, beautiful person. But while I was doing the doctorate, he calls me and he goes, I don't know what it is about this, but I feel like you need it. And he's like proselytizing me on it. And you got to realize I'm a recovering charismatic. Like I grew up in charismatic Pentecostal worlds. So anytime somebody calls to share something with me and they're super excited, I get triggered a bit. So I said, I hear you, but you understand I'm commuting 10 hours round trip across Atlanta. I'm doing 1 hour to 1 hour and 15 minutes one way every day at the same time as doing 115 to 120 credits per calendar year. I was like, when I don't have time, I mean, this is not even including the experience as a patient. I said, I don't have the time. And he goes, well, what if I get you an audiobook and you listen to it while you're driving? And I said, that's when I listen to my own notes that I've recorded from class. And he goes, give me 1 week. Give me 1 week and listen to this. It's a 9-hour recording. And I listened to the recording, man. And as soon as I heard it, it was just serendipitous that it was at the right time that I was also in a neurochemistry fellowship that I was studying the brain chemistry of what happens in different real estates. And as I'm like, this sounds a lot like basic brain function. What ended up happening was I went and looked up, well, what's the science behind the Enneagram? Is there any kind of information that's empirical? And it turned out there was nothing. There's no information on the Enneagram that was science-based. And that was 10 years ago. And it started me on this journey of where it felt like it really connected in a really easy, really tangible way to the way that the brain works based on contemporary science. But nobody had connected those dots. I remember the first time sitting down and looking through it and going, this is going to ruin me for the next 50 years. I'm just going to study this forever. So, and that's what's happened. Out of the last 10 years, I haven't gone a day without thinking about this nonsense, but it's been great.
Well, what are the origins? I don't know the origins of the Enneagram. So how did it come to our existence?
The interesting thing is with the Enneagram, most people in contemporary language around the Enneagram, because there's two major arcs of the Enneagram. There's the old school Enneagram that's really historical, and then the new Enneagram, which is the Enneagram of personality. And the Enneagram of personality that's got these 9 numbers, kind of like the Myers-Briggs has 16 types. The new Myers-Briggs is actually only about 50 years old. It was brought into the forefront in 1969 by a Bolivian named Oscar Ichazo when he ended up connecting with one of his students, Claudio Naranjo, which was in Berkeley in California. And all these academics and intellectual circles started sharing this by word of mouth. And it was like this whole Fight Club thing about like personality and profile and psychology and developmental psychology. Well, what ended up happening is a couple of the people in this closed group said, I think we should publish some work on this. And a lady named Helen Palmer published a book, and then Richard Rohr published a book, and then the floodgates opened. And so when you talk about the Enneagram, you have to talk about the Enneagram in terms of the last 50 years, especially with contemporary culture and contemporary language around, what number are you? Which is a common question in the Enneagram, which we'll debunk a bit because it's actually not true and it's not neuroscientifically true. You can't be a number. You can lead or be high or efficient in a number, but that's kind of like being a whole human and saying, well, what limb do you have? Yeah. Well, I have four limbs, hopefully. I've worked with a lot of combat injured veterans. Doesn't always tend to be the case, but we don't talk about ourselves in a lived experience by hand, foot. We talk about our bodies, right? Enneagram's the same thing. It's a collective. Mm-hmm. But the Enneagram actually, there's some argument and some history that's shown that it's as much as 3,000 or 4,000 years old in Egyptian culture. And there's actually things that have shown up even up to 3rd, 4th, 5th century Catholic Church language and documents. So the Enneagram as a kind of a concept for how you connect with the world from an engagement standpoint has existed as long as what's called the Desert Fathers and Mothers, which is old school, like Kabbalah, old school Sufi, old school Christian Desert Fathers and Mothers. So it's a pretty old lineage. It's arguably the oldest language around identity and personality, but it didn't become a personality typology until late 60s, early 70s.
Awesome. And I only started hearing about it the past, 3 years, right?
Yeah, I feel like mine was in the last 3 years. And honestly, the first 2-3 times they either did the test or someone asked me that was really into it. I'm like, oh, I'll go do it. And I did it. I was like, I don't get it.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
And that's normally the case.
And then
it feels super reductive sometimes.
And then I did it again and I got it. Oh, this, the thing that made the most sense to me, and that test that I had done, I had identified as a 3. And so one of the things I had read, so the achiever, and one of the things I had read talked about the core wound, childhood wound, and how the achiever processes that and goes where that core wound is what I'm led to believe is that as a child we're not lovable because we're always told to do something other than what our natural inclination is.
Yeah.
And so the achiever goes out and figures out what he's supposed to do, allegedly to get love. And so it's all kind of this doing well in school and sports and doing all these things. And then one day, hopefully, he wakes up and he's like, what do I really want? Because I've been living other people, what I think, actually, it's not even other people's expectations. It's what I think other people want from me so that I can get their love. And it was like, I read that and I was like, yeah, I had that moment a couple of years ago that I was not living my life. I had done a lot of things I wanted to do, but by and large, I had no idea who I was and what I wanted.
Right. Yeah, and this is the amazing thing. I think one of the things that a lot of folks have gravitated towards the Enneagram when it's used in really healthy ways. As we all know, it's any tool is basically as useful as the practitioner. It just depends on how you utilize it. But I think one of the things that has really kind of endeared folks to the Enneagram is the biggest difference with it when somebody thinks, and I'm pretty well studied on a lot of different ones from strength finders to DISC to Myers-Briggs to Berkman to there's so many different ways of figuring out, are you an extroverted otter or an introverted, hamster? There's so many different ways to figure out what version of a human you are, right?
Yeah.
And I say that in light because some of the times you're like, I don't know if I'm an animal or a human or a 4-letter word. Like my twin brother always answers when somebody asks him what his Myers-Briggs is. He says it's an STFU. Right? Because he's like, I don't want to answer that question, right? So, but he's also pretty funny about it when he's lighthearted. But the thing that I like about the Enneagram in comparison to a lot of the other tests or the other assessments is it's really designed to help you understand why you are the way you are, not what you do, what's effectively the best, objective goal for a job or the best profession to go for, the best way to interact with a colleague. It's not transactional. It's not only relational, but it's heavy duty introspective work about, okay, what made you the way that you are? What motivates you? What inspires you? What causes you to get up and go, this is what I'm moving towards and this is what I'm moving away from a really deep origin space issue, so that you're not dealing with such superficial conversations like, I think maybe I'd just do better as a driver. I think that ends up being a bit too reductive. And the goal with the work that I was doing was to go, if we connect this with the brain science, make it really practical, then we could actually step back and go, you're not only really efficient in a 3, for instance, but let's have a conversation about how you can functionally interact with all of these other numbers as if there were 9 members of the same band. And you might have a lead vocalist, but that doesn't mean 8 other members of the band just disappeared, right? They can function in a certain way, and the better cohesion for a larger group of people in either a team setting or a band setting or whatever the analogy may be that you use. There's never really ever effectively one solo artist ever, right? Even a solo artist has a sound engineer. Even a solo artist has somebody who sets up their gear, right? So understanding not only why we do what we do, but what is the interaction in all of those spaces that opens us up to really much more practice of becoming whole and healthy. Because I think there's no shortage of these tests constantly reminding us where we're broken. And I just don't think that that's helpful language, not based on contemporary psychology.
Yeah, I'd love to get into before we get really into it, like I want to get into like how you more practically, like how you took what you learned early on about the Enneagram and layered your work over it, and then kind of brought that, to the greater good.
Yeah, no, I think the simplest way that it ended up happening is, and honestly, this is sometimes just dumb luck, the way these things work out, you know. But the way the brain is set up is there's three primary areas of the brain. Your central nervous system, you have a left brain, a right brain, and your brainstem that collectively make up your central nervous system. And then in the Enneagram, there are three intelligence centers: head, heart, and gut. And the human experience is a mind, body, and a soul. You know, if you look at every major faith tradition, regardless of what faith you have, it's very Trinitarian in nature. There tends to be a reconciling, restraining, and affirming force involved, right? Depending on whether it's a masculine, feminine, or combined kind of energy that's involved. Even in the Trinity, there's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, which is actually the divine feminine. So in almost everything that you look at neuroscientifically, from an Enneagram standpoint, from a spiritual standpoint, there tends to be three forces working together to create a whole. The original guy who brought the Enneagram back into like contemporary language was a Armenian mystic named George Ivanovich Gurdjieff, G.I. Gurdjieff. And he actually introduced what was called fourth way, which is when you connect these three things of mind, body, and soul and they coalesce and they collectively work together, you get a fourth kind of new manifestation. So what ended up happening was when I got introduced to the Enneagram, I was already really inundated into how the brain works in terms of interactions between these three major areas. And the Enneagram lays directly on top of that. It's the exact same thing. So my argument was, instead of looking at it and saying you are a number, looking at it and saying the brain works off of efficiency models. It's designed to do whatever is going to give you the highest chance of survival. So based on your lifetime of lived experiences, you became really, really good at functioning in a 3 space. You also became really good at functioning at an 8 and a 7 collectively, which is really important to understand when you look at being healthy. Because if you only look at the 3, you don't look at them in relationship to the 8 and the 7 together, you're going to miss a huge opportunity to understand how you're wired. So the goal for the whole identity and brain-based Enneagram was to take all 9 numbers and the entire symbol of the Enneagram, because it looks like 2 pentagrams kind of intersected with each other. It's kind of wonky. But you actually take the entire symbol and you lay it directly over brain anatomy, and each of the numbers actually correlate with a part of the brain. So it's a little bit confusing if somebody's never heard it before, but the really simple way of understanding it is, if you look at whole brain function and you look at the whole Enneagram, they're synonymous for each other. It's not even a different language. It's the same language, different dialect. So they explain the same thing. So if somebody comes to me and says, I'm high in this number, where does that live in the brain? And how do I exercise that in a healthy way? How do I make sure that I'm, the most proficient that I can be? Sometimes it's active restraint because somebody's really, really wildly active in it, and they got to look at how to rein it in. Like I know for you and your history and a little bit of what I know, you're probably more inclined to a gas pedal, right? The nature of the way that you pray. So
yes, brother.
I don't need to show up and go, hi, Cal, it's nice to meet you. Let's get you motivated, right? It's like I got an idea. Maybe we figure out a way to go, how do we effectively do restraint exercises? It's like active resistance training is probably a better therapy for you than it would be for somebody who's never gotten out of bed and gone and opened a business, right? So it's understanding some of those pieces and combining kind of health language and exercise language to make it a little bit more practical.
So I love that you even said gas pedal too, because my old trading partner, not the Will Hobart, he used to say that he would have the hands on the steering wheel and just be steering and I would just gas pedal the whole way, and it was just his job to steer us, because I didn't have a brake. And it's definitely manifested in a lot of ways that have been challenging. And I think now that I've come into a place where I understand myself better, one of the questions I continue to ask myself is, can I just be with this? Do I have to go do this, or can I just allow this to unfold in front of me and just follow what feels really good? And so I think that's the active restraint that feels so good to me now. And before I was operating at such a high level of adrenaline, and as you would probably attest, you can never satiate that. It's a different energy than just being inspired and doing the work.
Yeah. And, and this is sometimes when you're looking at the Enneagram and connecting it with brain science, one of the things that I'm trying to make it super simple, because I've got a 4-year-old. 4-year-old and a 2-year-old and a baby due in 7 weeks. So I want to be able to have a conversation with my 4-year-old that I don't need to go, hey, here's a really fancy 17-syllable Latin word for clinical terminology. And he goes, what? I want to be able to go, hey, bro, you're hitting the gas a bit. I need you to pump the brakes, or I need you to just hold for a second. Because you can sum up the entire lived experience of a human being in a Goldilocks statement of too much, too little, just right, or gas, brake, and cruise. And it's relative relationships. Like, for instance, if you look at Myers-Briggs and somebody's massively extroverted, one of the healthiest things that an extroverted person can do is actively and intentionally practice introversion, because they're so addicted to extroversion, right? So if somebody like you is addicted to a gas pedal and somebody says, hey man, this isn't like a clinical diagnosis. This isn't saying that you're broken. It's saying you're predisposed to adrenaline and to your heart rate going up, that it's going to feel weird for you to slow down. So when you go out and you're like, I think what I've got to do is get my body physically more fit by increasing my cardio and my heart rate, and me going, it's actually going to feed into your addiction for a sensory experience to be so stimulated that what would actually be really healthy for your mental and emotional state is to do something like, I don't know, mindfulness and a body scan, where you have to sit still for long enough that you start freaking the fool out 3 minutes into it, because that's an actual workout. It's not a workout for you to go and do CrossFit for an hour. You love that. You get done with it and you're juiced. You do a 3-minute exercise that makes you want to get out of your own skin. That's probably a more effective workout, because it's hard. And for somebody who's a gas pedal to sit still and go, and everybody who's a gas pedal is already freaking out because I took 5 seconds to explain that.
Yes. Yes. I love it.
So you can distill the whole thing to every single topic, whether it's high level PhD level or it's basic level. Okay, I need to function in the next 6 minutes. You can literally look at everything and say it's a relative relationship with gas, cruise, and brake. And also keep funneling it into healthy, positive, opportunity, solution-oriented language, rather than saying, here's the 17 ways you suck as a human, right? We're all really good at self-deprecation. And if we're not, it's because we're in denial and we haven't dealt with our own self-deprecation. So I think having healthy language that's solution-oriented is a big difference with my clinic, because everybody who comes into me, I specialize in complex, unresolved cases. Nobody's coming into me needs to be reminded that they're dealing with some difficult stuff. Right. And I think these opportunities with like Enneagram and personality and identity, the more that we're like, oh man, I'm really gifted and it's a really amazing talent that I have to hit the gas. And that's great when I want to start a company or I want to be a visionary, I want to start this idea. But when's the last time I slowed down long enough to be present with my spouse to look them in the eye for 4 seconds straight? Right. So understanding that it's a gift, but it can also be a curse. Right. It's just that recognition of what that relationship with gas, cruise, and brake is.
That's so resonates with that, as I've kind of come into this other space in the last couple of years. That's one of the things that changed significantly for me was my training. I chilled the fuck out. And I mean, we've been up here in Idaho I've probably been for 3 weeks. I've exercised once, but I have meditated the shit out of this place and I am so grounded. Yeah. And I get excited for something like this and like I'm all in, but generally walking around here, like I've just been in a different state because I guess it's been understanding how to be discerning with the gas, the brake, and the cruise. And so that, it's so interesting. Like we had Peyton and I had wasn't a misunderstanding, that's for sure. We had some stress recently, and it was almost entirely caused because I had become so single-mindedly focused on something that it was like consuming like how the thing was going to play out, and we had all these different iterations, and in doing that, I was blocking everything else out, particularly how she felt about the thing that in this particular case had a financial component. And I had just dismissed that because I was a foot on the gas, and it kind of blew up in my face. And fortunately I had the wherewithal to take a deep breath, not engage in any kind of argument, to try to prove that I wasn't wrong. And I reached out to 3 of my best friends and was like, this is what just happened. And I know I wasn't right, but I just don't know exactly what happened. And they're like, dude, whatever happened, the fact that you just reached out to us is everything. Like, like not to lock horns right now because you're not thinking. And you reached, and it was amazing. Like, it created enough space for me to check myself and to understand what Peyton may be feeling, and then to be able to go to her with that and say, look, hand up, I was wrong. I was wrong.
Well, enough to even diffuse the situation so that we could actually have a conversation about it.
I went to meet Peyton after I had this great kind of piece of advice from all 3 of these close brothers, and laid down everything as like, hey, I'm sorry. And she's just like, I ain't letting, basically like, don't think that that's enough. And she like kind of let me have it. And I had to sit with that.
I needed a minute.
Yeah. And I needed to be okay with it not being resolved in the way that I thought it was going to be resolved when I went down there with hat in hand and said, I messed up. Yeah. And it was I was grateful that she did that, because it was just another reminder, like, listen, dude, like, you get into this state where you lose perspective on what's going on. Yeah. You're going to have a hard time.
Well, and also for me, because I have a history of dismissing my feelings, and then,
for sure.
And then just being, oh, it's okay. It's fine. I shouldn't have done this, or I should have, all the things. And I was like,
She went the other way.
Feeling is what I'm
She
feeling.
dismissed my feelings.
And I was
Which is a profound amount of growth for somebody who's high in a 2 energy.
Come on, girl.
Growing.
Yeah, it's, to make it practical for what you guys are talking about and what you shared in that story, because I think it's brilliant, is, for somebody, and to put it into language that makes sense for somebody who's never heard of this before, okay? Cal is highest in an 8, 3, and a 7, which is wild, because 8, 3, and 7 are all known as an assertive stance. They're the driver. All 3 of those are the gas pedal. So not only are
it's not my fault, guys.
It's not. It's no fault. It's a gift.
Just try to live with them.
Here's the thing: you can leverage a gift, or it can become something that will run roughshod over you. Right? Yep. It's like somebody who can sing really, really powerful vocals. Sometimes you don't. I love Pavarotti. He does not need to sing a bedtime Ave Maria at full volume for bedtime stories. Right? It's like, the best definition of meekness is exercising power with restraint. So like the superpower of somebody who's high in 8, 3, and 7 is meekness. It's not often practiced. Like, oh no, I could totally just absolutely just set this entire thing on fire. Or 8, 3, 7 energy is like explosive. It's the fireworks. It's the sensationalism. It's the, oh my God, I've got this idea. But I actually have 17, but what we're going to have to do is very quickly work through all 17 right now at the same time, right? So somebody who's high in 8, 3, and 7 sounds like they're speaking in tongues because you're telling you all the ideas at the same time. And you're like, whoa, pump the brakes, take a deep breath. So, but by comparison, Peyton is high in 2, 7, and 9. So you guys have some correlation with 7 energy being really enthusiastic and really joyful. Like, it's easy to be around 7 energy and be like, oh, this is really vibrant. It's really bright. But she's bookended by a 2 and a 9. And a 2 is somebody who's very, very compassionate, very, very interested in serving and taking care of. It's a natural gift of nurturing. And the 9 is the natural gift of rest, right? So when somebody like Cal comes in and goes, I just had this epiphany about how I feel emotionally and how it's affecting you emotionally. And Peyton's like, I have literally had that thought 17 times every day for the last 4 years. I'm glad you've arrived. But it doesn't mean that we've discussed it. It means you've become aware of it. Right. So the revelation.
Just put a language to things I've felt over the past 3 years. Thank you.
Yeah. So it's one of those moments where to give you a kind of a physical visual experience, as somebody who's high in 8, 3, 7, who recognizes that they may have found an opportunity for improvement. It's like somebody who's going 130 miles an hour and they just did a loop around their own interstate and passed the billboard that's been there for years and gone, oh my God, did you see that? I did that. And then they're still at 130 miles an hour. So they've passed the billboard and the other person that they're in relationship with has been standing underneath the billboard because they erected it. They put it up. And so it's one of those things where somebody who's really high in 837 as a driver goes, man, I want to be, especially if you're high in 3 and 7, you want to celebrate 7 energy that's excessive to discovering that emotional intelligence and being like, can we really just be excited? But what you've done is just walked into a conversation with your own revelation, but you've just walked into a conversation of acknowledging someone else's pain point. And that's really hard for somebody in a 7 space to sit with. But for somebody who's in a 2, like Peyton, it's 2s are allergic to making it about them, even though that's exactly what they desire. They want for somebody to ground them and center them, but it almost feels it definitely feels inappropriate. So why the story is entertaining is both my twin brother and my older brother are very high in 7-8 energy, which is 2 of your top 3, Cal. So I'm super familiar with this space. And it's been, they're so energetic, but it's one of those things where you go, I know that this is going to be really hard, but this is not a 3-minute conversation. I need you to just pack a lunch, sit down, and do a lot more listening than talking. And that's really, really when you're used to being the driving force and the driver, so yeah, it's a great example of an interaction between people who are wired the way that you guys are wired. It's pretty cool.
And so I would love to just pause for a second and remind the listeners that we did the test yesterday, and Dr. Jerome is working with us for the first time now.
Yeah. So we're doing this in real time.
Yeah, he gave us the opportunity.
So this is all new.
Yeah, he gave us the option to discuss it beforehand and then come on, and I think he understood that this would be way more fun.
Yeah.
But even you just saying that about the sign, I'm like, yeah, that resonated so deeply with me, because we've even having that conversation, like, how have you not seen me in our 20 years of marriage?
Yeah, and it's a relative
to not
relationship
take that personally. Yeah.
Yeah. Because for you, you've been sitting cemented, grounded in that experience at a speed that allows you to fully absorb the experience because you've built that experience block by block. But if Cal is driving and he's going at that speed, he's passing that same object, but at a speed that makes it a blur. So it's one of those things that it can also this is one of the interesting things in relationship dynamics, because I've been married 15 years and with my wife 17, and we've known each other for 24. So we've got a lot of history, even though we're young, because I'm only 37. But the reality is the science has shown you can have 2 people have the exact same physical experience with 2 completely different encounters. Both of them could pass, a polygraph or a lie detector test, completely describe the situation, and it'd be completely different, but only one event transpired. So it's those opportunities to go, how is it remotely possible that I could be standing here with such an obvious indication? Well, if you think about it from a relative relationship with speed, if Cal's going 150 miles an hour and he's passing that billboard, it's very understandable for him not to recognize the detail of what you're experiencing. So then the compromise, or like you guys talk about, the collaboration, moves into a space of going, okay, how do I get him to recognize my conversation at his speed, or how do I get him to slow down to match my speed? And that's where equilibrium comes in a lot more, because sometimes you have to have somebody who's inclined to be a brake pedal or a cruise control to either accelerate or decelerate in relationship to their partner. And for somebody who's really high in gas pedal like Cal, it's a safe bet that not only for your own health, but for the health of the people around you, like you're talking about, figuring out ways to slow down relative to your own needs and the needs of the people around you is almost undeniably going to benefit you and everybody around you, because you're so biased towards hitting the gas, which again is not a negative. It's just relative to your lived experience. It said, I'll give you give you guys a couple of words that might make it helpful for you and for your listeners to kind of contextualize
please.
this. Is that cool? Okay. So one of the things, if anybody hears this and they either know the Enneagram or they're getting into the Enneagram, first and foremost, the thing I encourage you to do is do not type yourself. Do not just identify a type, okay? Because like I said, that's like being a human being and saying my entire lived experience is based on my right arm. To function as a human being, you're a collective whole system. That's like the old science of saying you're a right brain person versus a left brain person. Well, if that's the case, what happened to the rest of your brain? You're a whole person. You might be efficient in something. So one of the ways to look at when you take a test like the Ready, it's one of the ones I recommend, is look at it as a diagnostic, not a diagnosis. Okay. Everybody that you go to as a clinician who does a lab value or does blood work or does an advanced imaging, that's just information that's designed for somebody who's got content expertise to interpret. It's very, very rare that you get a lab value and one value is 100% a bullseye for a diagnosis. That's super rare. You got to combine multiple aspects. So when you take something like the Enneagram, and you guys are both good examples because you got some really high numbers, is to look at it based on motivations and based on efficiencies will help a lot more than going, I am a number. Because when you make a statement that says I am, you're making a based statement. That's very different than I experience or I have. I'll give you myself as an example. I am not a migraine. Okay. I am not depressed. I have had 2 suicide attempts in my history. I've wrestled with anxiety and depression significantly. And I've had 22 years of history with migraines. But for a health, mental, emotional, physical healthcare standpoint, it's much more helpful for me to say, I experience a high frequency of migraines, but I don't have migraines every day. Now, I am not a migraine. This is why one of the healthy language shifts has been from saying that is a homeless person to that's a person experiencing homelessness, right? Because as soon as you put them in a home, they're no longer homeless. So it can't be a state of identity. It's a state of relative experience, right? So to put that in context, for instance, with Peyton, 2 of Peyton's highest numbers are a 2 and a 7. A 2 is the natural human capacity for nurturing. They're motivated by appreciation. It's like, I want to make you feel loved and I want to feel loved in doing that. I want to appreciate you. And appreciation by definition is to increase in value. So when Peyton is in space with another human being, they will feel more valuable as a result of just being in the same space with her. That's her desire to do that. If you add in the 7, it's also saying I'm going to be enthusiastic while I do that. I'm going to be energized. I'm going to inspire you. I'm going to be joyful. I'm going to have that degree of experience that says, how can I love you enthusiastically? Or how can I enthusiastically love you? Right? Those sort of things go hand in hand. It doesn't mean they're one or the other. It's a combination of those two. They kind of sing a duet in almost everything that you do, right? Does that make sense?
And I love that you said that our dear friend Marilee, who's allowed us to use her home today, she's also a doctor, and that was her, the sentiment that she shared with us before coming on today was her frustration with people identifying as I am a 2 or I am and singling in on that, and sometimes even like developing that a deeper identity with pride and things like that, as opposed to seeing the big picture and maybe what's maybe most presenting or more relative to your experiences. So I'm so appreciative that you brought that up, because that was her one piece of advice that she shared with us last night. So thank you.
I love that. And one, she's got a beautiful name, Mary Lou is great.
I know.
And also you can even see it's really interesting. Each person, in terms of their efficiency, will use particular adjectives or words or verbs in their language. And you said, I'm so appreciative.
I picked up on that too.
Right?
You did?
Yeah.
So a two is naturally motivated by appreciation. Again, not a negative, because you got to look, most of the time when we've been given information and insight into ourselves, it's so quickly fast-tracked to being associated with shame and insufficiency that we're not used to getting information and going, wow, that's powerful, or wow, that's a gift, or wow, that's a skill that I can leverage in a healthy way if I understand how many resources I have and to what degree I can do that. If somebody gave us our identity as a resource and we budgeted it effectively, we wouldn't go, oh God, I got 20 grand in my savings account. Damn. No, it's like, I got 20 grand in my savings account. What should I do with that? Right? But we find out I'm naturally gifted at appreciation. Oh, does that mean that I'm always needy? Right? Like we always end up moving into these spaces of shame. And one of the goals of my work is to go, if somebody walks into my clinic and they're really, really dealing with significant issues, I need to find out how to resource them to become healthier, not how to recognize just simply where things are difficult, right? But to connect the dot for you for just a second, with what I was saying there is one of the things that can be really interesting that doesn't happen a lot in the Enneagram world is to not only have a conversation around what you're most efficient at and what you kind of move towards, but where you're least efficient and when you move away. So if you look at the whole spectrum of the Enneagram, you can put it as a pursuit and avoidance strategies. And you can also do those as addiction and avoidance strategies. So for instance, for Peyton, you're really naturally inclined to both be appreciated, to nurture people, to be enthusiastic, to be a peacemaker, to negate conflict, to find rest, and to do it really well so that you feel successful in having accomplished that. All four of those things, if you could wake up every day and make people feel rested and taken care of, and also do it in a way that brings a smile to people's face, that will feel like a win every day of the week for you. That language that I just used is combining 2, 7, 9, and 3 energy collectively, because those are your 4 highest numbers, right? Yeah. But what you're allergic to is if somebody, especially in an unhealthy way, introduced an 8, 6, or a 1, right? Or let's especially just look at and there's a lot of numbers that are pretty close together at the bottom.
Okay.
But especially a 1. A 1 is known as a reformer, which is really then sometimes in an unhealthy way is known as a perfectionist. So if somebody sat down in an aggressive way and told you that your relationship was dependent on how well you did things for them and went through all of the checklists of where you missed it and how you didn't execute effectively, that would be a really quick trigger. You know, like, I'm not here for that. I'm not here for the aggression. I'm not here for the conflict. I'm not here for the challenge. I'm not here for you holding our relationship ransom in terms of your loyalty. So it's like, I don't want to do that. I'd rather be in a space where I could do something that makes me feel like I can connect relationally and we can have a good time. But at the end of it, we can rest well. It's like, I'm willing to bet the difference in the type of vacation that you guys take. Like, when you're on a vacation, you'd be profoundly excited to find somewhere where you can just shut down and shut off. And then Kyle is like, I have 74 things planned for this, right?
As it turns out,
actually,
I get
is it switch?
No.
Well, a little bit.
You're a little more adventuresome, but
no,
Doc, when I go on vacation, I chill out.
Do you switch off?
I do.
For him, he does. And usually if you're not with me, then I go on adventures.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's like I got
old version. Now I'm more attuned to that.
And we have the kids, and what if they're like, it's
a whole to do for me with the this and the that. I'd rather just chill and
right on.
I enjoy
more predictable.
I enjoy my alone time. I think that's where that comes from.
And
we can dive in that.
Yeah. But. And this is where, this is why I always tell everybody, and this is even where I love doing it with you guys live, because like we mentioned before the call, I think one of the things that a lot of people who do either personality work or typology or identity or even clinical work, they don't have the flexibility to allow for the person they're sitting with to give them really good feedback, like a case history, because I can only know so much from an outside perspective that as I update my information, then I course correct based on as the picture gets more clear. Yeah. Versus going, no, I'm the content expert and this is the way it is, because we're not fixed like that. There's a lot of variability. So specifically when I talk about Enneagram language, and to your friend's point that you mentioned from last night, what happens a lot of times with the Enneagram or any other identity, or even in relationships, because you guys have been married for more than 20 years, right? Or you've been together more than 20 years, is somebody will tell you that this is just the way you are, or this is just that type, or this is just that profile. It's just that Myers-Briggs, right? And the reality is that there's so much nuance to who we evolve into. You guys are completely different people than you were yesterday, never mind 3 years ago. You're evolving, right? You're transforming. So one of the things that can sometimes also be helpful in looking at the Enneagram language is looking at it and saying, based on your lifetime of lived experiences. So for instance, when you mentioned just a second ago, Cal, you're like, that's just the way I am, right? So based on your lifetime of lived experiences, your experience as a human being in your brain has said this orientation of what's high and what's low gives you the highest degree and highest probability of survival. The challenge is that's built in our adolescence, and what existed for us when we were 8 or 10 or 12, which is built into our subconscious psyche, is called interpersonal neurobiology, internal family systems, a lot of neuropsych. That may have been really relevant when you're having a lot of conflict with your primary care providers when you were 10, but it's not the same conversation when you go to your spouse and go, I just had a revelation that I may not be the best version of what you need today. Right? The triggers are different. So for instance, for you, Kyle, with 8, 3, and 7, 8 is motivated by being able to disrupt things, by changing things, by being a driver, by being able to lead, by being able to show up and being really energetic, especially physically. It's a very key point of extroversion. 3 is like, what are you successful in? What are you producing outside of yourself that allows somebody to measure you and go, I don't find you wanting, right? And then the 7 is saying, I can be enthusiastic at the same time. So in your lifetime growing up, what is your relative relationship being? I need you to succeed. I need you to be excited and extroverted when you do that. I need you to present a fit external image that people are attracted to. And I need you to do it in a way that doesn't have you following anybody you're always leading. Like that language, what was built into your experience growing up that said that's the way that you develop into a successful person. And then as you become healthier and you become more aware of what your needs are in a relationship and as a parent and as a spouse, you go, that may have been what I need to satisfy the relationship dynamics of what I had growing up, but they're no longer needed now. So majority of the work with the Enneagram is going, I'm inclined to this, I'm biased to this. This used to be my truth, but it may not be anymore. So how do I become a healthier version if those aren't the dependencies that I have in my current relationships, but they may have been in my past? If that makes sense.
Yeah, I love it. When I first did the Ready test, I didn't read the instructions. I did it like 6 weeks ago, and I didn't read the instructions all the way through, and I kept oscillating between what happens like when I'm unconscious and just act, and what do I really want to be when I'm fully integrated. And it came up with an odd number. It didn't really make sense for me. So I could see when I'm integrated, I would say when I've used that restraint, and that's when you were talking about that for her, Peyton has very much been the break to the point where doesn't feel good a lot of the times. It's like, whoa, you're like, I see this thing so clearly, and that's my mindset. And she's like, no, wait. And I'm prone to being impulsive and these other ways that I can show up. But, so it's very interesting when I think that's the role you've really taken on in our relationship has done. And I guess for me, the same has been be like, let's move, let's do this. But one of the things you said that it's something that I wrestled with when we were really struggling. And man, I just got the sense, I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I just want to stop hurting her. I didn't get it. And I think the analogy of having the foot on the gas the whole time and just missing everything, all the clues, but having no idea that it was just like, I need to slow down and tune in. And so anyway, like that came to mind. It was like, I was just at a loss. Like, I don't know what to do because I love her, but I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
It goes much deeper than that, I'm sure, but
for sure. And one, I appreciate you sharing that. Cause I mean, that's really the crux of where relationships either succeed or they don't. And I love the title of the podcast that you guys had for that, new marriage, same partner. It's like, if you repeat the process that got you into the space where you had that revelation, then you're just going to reproduce the same information. It's the same experience. But to go, I think there's really incredible resource and opportunity, but there's got to be a major course correction. Well, from one of the things that I would point out in kind of just looking at your guys' top 3 numbers of where that's a classic example is 8 is really comfortable with tension. It's really comfortable with change. It's really comfortable with the energy level going all the way through the roof. Like you probably couldn't get more energetic than you're comfortable with in a lot of ways. It's something that you're familiar with. Mm-hmm. The 3 is saying, look, we're going to make a goal. We're going to succeed. We're going to drive through it. We're going to make this work, right? It's very, very goal oriented, very success driven. And then the 7 is like, we're going to have a lot of fun while we're doing that, but it's going to be the FOMO piece, right? Like we're going to move in so quick that you don't have to worry about what we just passed. If they didn't stick with it and they didn't survive, they weren't meant to be here. It's okay. We'll work it out. And why I say that is when you talk about a really easy way to look at the Enneagram is to look at, instead of just your type, look at which intelligence center is highest for you. And it's called gut, head, and heart. So that's combining the gut is 8, 9, and 1 together. The heart is 2, 3, and 4 together. And then the head is 5, 6, and 7. So you're more inclined to think, feel, or act. So a really, really easy way to hyper distill what I'm talking about for you is out of all of the information that comes up in your test, you're statistically biased towards the gut, which is a reaction. It's to go, I'm just impulsive. Boom. Right. What was Cal thinking? Wasn't thinking, just acted, just moved. And then in retrospect, going back and going, okay, what happened? Right. Shoot first, ask question second.
Yes.
I got an idea. I got an idea. But for Peyton, she's highest by a lot in her heart triad. Like those three numbers combined, 2, 3, and 4. So if she walks into a conversation, regardless of the context, there's a high probability she's going to have a feeling about it, a relational connection, an emotional connection first, and then she's going to think about it. But for her to just impulsively react without having the chance to go, what am I feeling? And what do I understand about that feeling? The order of events is feel first, think about it second, and then if you have time, act on it. Where that becomes really interesting is in the relationship example that you just gave. 2s are allergic to sharing with somebody where they're hurting because they're there to be a caretaker, not to be receiving care. That would be like being a waiter and sitting at the table and asking the person that you're with to serve you, to feed you. It's wholly counterintuitive. So to sit down and share with somebody where you're hurting, not only does it feel foreign, it also feels inappropriate. And then on top of that, the reality is, especially if you're married or you're in partnership with somebody who's very, very quick to move, oftentimes somebody who's high in a 2 energy will restrain themselves from sharing the complexity of what's happening because they don't feel like they're going to be able to get the time and the connection and the presence of the person that they're communicating with to fully unpack the global relevance of what they're experiencing. Like to share with you the full comprehensive nature of what I'm experiencing would require enough belief for you to stay present long enough for me to properly unpack it, and you stay present to care long enough to actually see the whole thing. Because how can you properly fix it if you don't properly understand it? Right. And that's part of that challenge. And then when you look at 7 and 9 for Peyton, 1, hard to share what you need as a 2. Very inclined to still say, I'm okay. Everything's fine. I'm dying on the inside,
All
but
my
everything's
friends
good. Yeah. How you doing? Doing just good. Blessed and a blessing. Right. It's like, it's one of those things where it's just not, it's, you just have to go, how am I supposed to in a moment properly help you understand how much I'm hurting? And then when you add in that 9, the 9 is saying, I just at all costs want to just feel a little bit of peace. Anything for a quiet space internally. So when you have somebody who's high in 837, who's coming in like just a freight train and doesn't slow down long enough to understand the pain, the 2 will sacrifice themselves on the altar of whatever the experience is going to be because they just want to at least achieve some degree of peace. Because the conflict that it would take to have an extended conversation to properly unpack your pain feels more difficult than to just simply move forward in the next exciting adventure or whatever the case may be. So I think what you're talking about in that example is a really great way of saying, okay, if you only look at your top numbers, like your scores came back and you're actually highest in, for Cal, you're highest in 8 and 3, then you're not having a conversation around what is driving so much of this energy is all 3 of those things together. And then for Peyton saying, look, I want to have a conversation with you, but we have to slow down long enough in the 9 space that I live in to actually be able to get you present long enough to go, this is where I'm wrestling with stuff. And the challenge for both of you that I'm sure you've seen over the last 20 years is 7 energy is kind of allergic to talking about their pain, because if you're talking about your pain, you're not having a good time. And 7s are about having a good time. They're about going, what's the next thing that we're going to move into? So you can both, for different motivations, elope and abdicate the responsibility of really going into deep, hard conversations, because that's a lot more fatiguing. You have a 5-minute hard, honest conversation. It will cost you more fuel than it would to spend a week going all over the world adventuring with each other. Right.
I feel like you just explained our struggle in communicating in our marriage, and so beautifully, because that's exactly, I felt like you spoke from my heart, and then it's exactly what happens is I don't communicate, and then I would say that you get frustrated because I haven't communicated how I felt, and then one day when I'm finally brave enough to communicate, I have, my laundry list, and I'm like, and then, and it's like I'm finally able to speak it and share it. And then, Cal would be like, well, why didn't you just tell me that? Like, why have you waited so long to just share that with me? And I think that's been an example in our relationship for many, many years. Would you agree?
Yeah, but you've also done a much better job of actually communicating that stuff. Like my hats off to Peyton, because and I've known it's taken courage. I just know that when she's come, it's because she is hurting and it's not easy. And so it does get my attention. That said, if things aren't necessarily going great between us, I'm not necessarily slowing down.
But I also think it takes me getting to a breaking point to be able to have the conversation.
Right. Right. And this is where I think, whenever we look at it, I think one of the things that unfortunately for all of us as human beings that we're given a disservice on, especially in contemporary cultures, we're all given such great perspective on how to be physically fit, like how to do an exercise for our body. But most of us are not really given a lot of tools on how to exercise relationally or exercise mentally and emotionally to build stamina, right? Because what you're talking about is a conversation around resilience. Like, how quickly can you shift gears and realize it's not going to kill you, right? So for you to step in and go, I'm going to hit the gas specifically on sharing where I'm hurting on this one thing, to at least give myself the opportunity to not go for a high rep workout on sharing the 40 things that I'm currently wrestling with, but let me do a high weight and just share this one heavy thing that I'm carrying with you. I just want to engage that and just get outside of my comfort zone to go, man, this is really hard for me. Can you slow down just long enough to give me 10 minutes to just unpack this? I don't need an answer. I just need you to be present with it. Because when that builds resilience and stamina, it doesn't require Cal to be in a situation to go, okay, so you're gonna need me to slow down and be completely disconnected from resolving this, fixing this, supporting you in it, coming up with a new plan, being connected, acknowledging where I'm at, seeing that there's something that's not right, and by the end of the conversation, damn it, we're succeeding. Like everything, like to walk out of a conversation and go, that's not fixed, and that's okay, or she's still hurting, and it's not necessarily something that I need to fix, or she's hurting and it is my fault, but that's okay too, or she's hurting and it's her fault, and that's okay too. What I say with that is, in these spaces, the way the brain is worked that can be helpful for context for this, for folks who are listening, and kind of why I talk about this, is when you talk about motivation, 100% of what the brain does on a daily basis is survival based. It's saying, is this going to give me a higher probability of surviving? And then is it going to move me into a higher degree of safety? And then is it going to move me into a space where I feel more comfortable, right? So survive, then safe, then comfort or gratification. So when you're inclined to a particular space, anything that interferes with that space is going to feel like a trigger. It's going to feel like it's really, so for instance, with Peyton, if anybody interferes with your space of feeling valued and feeling affirmed or feeling seen, feeling cared for, feeling relationally connected, if somebody interferes with that or intervenes with that, it'll trigger you really quick. But for Cal, if somebody interferes with your ability to actually do something that you're trying to accomplish, like somebody creates a traffic jam in your experience as a human being, they create a blockade, and they will, one, they don't even recognize that they're oblivious to it. But two, they do it intentionally as a point of conflict, and they try to slow you down and impede your progress. That's going to be like, I don't need you to be my brake pedal. Right? So what does it create in terms of somebody saying, like, for instance, somebody introduces language around where you're not succeeding and how you're not doing well. Knowing from the way that we're wired as a human being that if Peyton steps in and goes, I don't feel seen and I don't feel heard, your brain is going to go, and immediately being triggered by that and recognizing she's not saying I'm a failure. She's saying she doesn't feel heard. She doesn't feel seen. And then for Kyle to say, this is really, really difficult for me to sit in this conversation for 5 minutes because I haven't had the history. I didn't have that model for me growing up. I don't know what that looks like. So when somebody shares this is difficult, it doesn't mean that you're difficult, right? Because we're naturally inclined as human beings to personalize things. Mm-hmm. So if we come into all these conversations, and the reason I love the Enneagram around this is, especially with the brain science, is the faster that we're able to recognize what triggers us, and then we're able to recognize that almost every conversation, good, bad, or indifferent, is going to trigger something in us instinctively. The sooner that we move that into a conscious level and we become aware of it, the better we're able to navigate it, because we move from autopilot to pilot. You have to understand 95 to 97% of what happens to us as a human being on a daily basis is subconscious. 95 to 97. So the sooner you recognize, do I feel safe? Nope. Why don't I feel safe? Do I feel triggered? Yep. Why do I feel triggered? Does this feel life-threatening? For sure. Is it life-threatening? No. Right. As soon as somebody steps in from a leadership position and goes, this feels like you're dying, but you're not, then all of a sudden the whole strategy changes and we end up getting into conscious conversations where you're talking about, how did I do the introspective work? How did I do the inner work? How did I develop a practice that in my 30s, if somebody had said, I go on vacation and I sit and I meditate and that feels great, like, would the 30-year-old version of you being like, that make sense? Or would it have laughed at you? Right?
I would have been partying hard.
Right. So it's one of those things where you're looking at it and going, probably the easiest way that I would distill this in terms of personal work and also the nature of brain development is the idea of neuroplasticity is that we can change, that we're not fixed, that we're capable. It's like open source software. You can get an upgrade to your operating system and change everything. But the reality is, if you don't have any awareness of what you need to change, everything stays the same because your brain's really good at doing whatever keeps you alive. Well, if you're in your 30s, being in a space where you're partying nonstop because that's gratifying, and then you get into your 40s and you're like, I'm a parent and a spouse and I want to figure out how to shift gears. A really easy way to think through it is if it's hard, it's helpful. If it's harmful, it's not. So if you're doing some sort of shift and it does not feel difficult, it's probably not going to do anything for you because it's like a workout. No good workout. No workout is a good workout that doesn't break a sweat and make you a little bit sore, right? So when you're looking at these spaces and going, man, this feels really, really hard to slow down and have a conversation where my spouse is sharing with me where I've missed it. That doesn't mean it's life-threatening. It just means it's uncomfortable. It's a very different space because your brain is asking, am I going to survive this? Sometimes it doesn't feel like it, right? And that's why most, if we're honest, most marriages are ending because they're like, I can't survive this long term. Literally, I can't, right? It's a survival-based question. It starts and ends with survival. Sorry, that was a little long-winded.
No,
I love the context.
Yeah. And one thing that I've noticed over the past year is that I am one of those people in his life who does come in as a roadblock. I've noticed that I come in and pump the brakes, sometimes the emergency brake. But I don't want to be that person in his life. I don't want to be a roadblock. But I find myself doing that sometimes. And I've also noticed that, so a few things came up for me. So I'm that person who is the roadblock and I don't necessarily want to be in our relationship. Two, I judge myself based on his mode of action. Like, oh my, how does he do it? You know, if I could be him for one day, I would have probably 5 of my things I want to accomplish in my life done. Like, seriously, can I just be you one day? Because, and so then I'm like, oh my God, I suck. Like, how am I going to finish? And then I'm exhausted just watching him or being in his space, energetically exhausted.
And I feel that energy, by the way. It's like, I'm not attractive right now. Even though I'm on mission, it's like,
he's like, look, I just did all these things. And I'm like,
yeah,
it's hard.
Yeah.
It's like you're on a roller coaster and we just got done. And he's like, that was awesome. And I'm like, I'm exhausted. And so in a relationship, in me identifying these few things that I feel shows up in our relationship as a challenge, any thoughts on that?
Sometimes she slashes the tires too, just to make sure I'm not going anywhere.
True story.
That's great.
Has not put a boot on yet.
Yeah, there's legitimately a boot on the car. It's like Cal's gone to the airport and he's like, none of my credit cards. Do you have any idea what? Yeah, I think the fraud thing. I'm not sure what. I called them and they said that you canceled all of my cards.
And I do it very. I would say I don't know, maybe in a manipulative way.
Into the mic.
Sure.
Make sure everyone hears that. Now,
Well, the timing was good that he was being honest that it was
She's like,
actually hard to hear.
like you can speak into the mic this one time.
No, it's okay. It's actually,
I got a good sound guy.
The funny thing is, it's like my mom is British and she was born in England but raised in Zimbabwe, Rhodesia before it's called Zimbabwe. And she has this really, really funny thing that when she curses, she does it quieter as if it's going to be less relevant. It's less bad. It's like if you whisper a curse, it's not as sinful, right? It's really cute. It's very endearing. Because no matter what happens, her body language changes and she's like, but that just happened where it's like, sometimes it's like it happened.
I would say, isn't that would just be, I would say manipulative is a tough word. I would say it's more just strategy based.
Right, which I appreciate. I appreciate you being willing to make a lighthearted version of that, because 7 energy is best at levity, because levity neuters pain. Mm-hmm. But the reality is what Peyton just shared is actually, one, transparently painful because she knows that she's got the capacity for manipulation. Mm-hmm. And 2, to answer your question, one of the things that's really fascinating, and this is a harder thing to learn, and maybe if you guys go back and you watch it on the video, but for people who are high in 837 energy, they're not used to eye contact for an extended period of time because they're so quickly moving, right? They're kinetic. But if somebody looks at you for an extended period of time while you were sharing that example of where you feel like that you sometimes can be the roadblock or be the e-brake or be those things, there were 4 separate times where your and your facial expression changed because your emotionality peaked in all 4 of those spaces. So as your facial tone changes, there's a degree of disappointment about being that because you don't want to be that. Like, you guys have such an endearing space where you can tell that you want to support each other and you want to see each other succeed. So it's like, how do I find the balance in sharing where I'm hurting, but it also not being a hindrance or a burden? Because again, you got to realize 2 energy will automatically feel like they are an encumbrance, like they're a burden, like they don't want to be the sick person in the middle of a well conversation. You know what I mean? Like, they don't want to be flawed. They don't want to be a hindrance to somebody's happiness, right? So you have to weigh and measure all of those times. And this is something where you talk about, like, how do you find a balance with that? That if you're married to somebody who's high in 2 energy, especially for you, Cal, if you're high in those gas pedal spaces, if a 2 energy starts to share where they're hurting and it doesn't sound needy and it doesn't sound manipulative, it sounds honest, you should literally put pause on everything else in your life and center to that. Because the amount of work that it takes for 2 energy to get to the point where they're willing to actually verbalize where they're hurting, they've already gone through hours, if not days, if not weeks of prep to just get to that point. And it's kind of like being in the middle of a therapy session. You're just unloading where you're really hurting, and then all of a sudden somebody's phone rings and the moment's gone. To get back into that space, to re-engineer what it takes to go, I just don't feel safe. I don't feel good. Like that, because what ends up happening, to Peyton's point, if a 2 energy doesn't feel like they're going to land in a safe space to share with you where they're hurting, they'll start to manipulate the environment enough for you to see how much they're hurting, and they'll do kind of a cry wolf perspective, or they'll do a lot of passive aggressive techniques, right? Well, they'll start to go, well, a lot of things happened today. Did you see that? Did you see all those things? Are you affirming me? Are you appreciating me? Do you see me? What ends up happening is you move into a passive aggressive manipulative space to say, man, I'm going to do all these subtle kind of backhanded compliment things because I'm trying to get your attention, but I don't feel safe enough to bring it to the transparent, hey, I need you for a minute. So when you're talking about being a brake pedal and being an e-brake, I think one of the things that's sometimes helpful to think about for that, Peyton, is if you're in a really strong 2-7 space, telling somebody that you need them and what you need is already going to be something that you're allergic to. Your face just did it again, right? With your eyes and your mouth. Yep. Okay.
I felt it.
Yeah, you automatically get triggered because the idea of saying, I need you and I also have a need feels so vulnerable, right? And at the same time, 7 energy is allergic to pain. It doesn't want to be vulnerable. So for a 2-7 to be vulnerable about yourself, you're allergic to that because everything in your history has told you that's not the best way to handle feeling safe. Because I don't know if you guys know, but the root word of vulnerability is vulnera. And vulnera in Latin means to be woundable, right? So if you're doing something vulnerable, you're literally laying on your back, showing your belly to somebody and going, I feel super, super woundable. Please don't hurt me. Please don't step on me. Please don't injure me. So for somebody high in 2-7 energy to go, I'm sitting with my pain. Can you sit with it? And can you recognize it's really hard for me to tell you what I need? And then that person just be present with it. That's really hard for somebody to do who's high in 2 and 7. But then as soon as somebody like Cal, who's high in 8, 3, and 7, it's hard for you to sit with pain as a 7. You're like, you know what? It's kind of like my dad used to joke, if your hand hurts, just pass me a hammer, I'll hit a toe. Take your mind right off. My dad was also a special forces guy in the Rhodesian military for a long time, so he's pretty intense. He spoke like 13 languages, and it was just, he was like, no, I actually could hurt you in other ways and take your mind right off of it, and he totally meant it. But what I mean by that is if Peyton's, or she's pulling the e-brake, remember that as soon as that e-brake is pulled and it slams the brakes on your experience for you, Cal, your brain is automatically, as a defense strategy, going to be triggered because your momentum massively changed. So now all of a sudden your spouse becomes the threat. Your partner becomes the threat. And very quickly, consciously moving into that higher part of your brain that you've worked on for the last decade and going, what am I aware of? Of going, my spouse and my partner is not the enemy. They're not a threat. They just pulled the e-brake. Why did they pull the e-brake? Like, ask a clarifying question, and then as quickly as possible, move into a space where it's like, okay, how do I help triage? Like, how do I sit with the pain? What's your goal, not my goal? And how do I help work through this conflict strategy with you? Because one thing that's interesting where you're polarized is you're super high in 8, Cal, and Peyton is super low in 8. So that difficulty of dealing with that conflict and bringing the conflict up and manufacturing the conflict for Peyton is going to feel so foreign to be like, I'm going to introduce conflict in this space. So her idea of conflict resolution is just not introducing conflict. Let's just make sure that
I was going to ask you to clarify what 8 is.
Yeah. So 8 is the space that says I've got the natural capacity for disruption or change or tension. They're motivated by being able to see things change and to grow, right? The natural gift is growth. So if you think about growing a muscle, you can't grow a muscle without actually tearing the muscle and helping it to grow. You get little tiny tears in the muscle and you develop muscle mass. So growth intrinsically has a lot of pain involved in it. Growth has a lot of tension and a lot of being stretched. Well, for Cal, if you look from a mental, emotional standpoint and even your own physique, you've got a capacity to go, the exercise is worth the effort, right? Mm-hmm. I have a history of experience. If I look through my upbringing going, did I have significant change? Did I have conflict? Did I have assertiveness? Did I have aggressiveness? Did I have spaces growing up that felt like they were conflict oriented? Or did I have a lot of intensity and change and inconsistency, right? Did I have those growing up? And in order for me to survive, I had to learn how to speak that language. So Cal learned how to speak the language of disruption and change, constant change. For you, for whatever reason, that didn't become a dialect that rose to the surface. So when it shows up and somebody starts speaking that dialect of intensity, and especially conflict that comes with aggression or comes with argument or it comes with challenge and it's not healthy and it doesn't feel safe, you're going to start to retreat, not advance. So when a 2 tries to share with somebody who's high in 8 that they don't feel safe or they don't feel needed, they know they're going to be introducing something that may be met with intensity and that may not feel safe. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Speaks to me.
So that's specific to you guys. I don't know if that resonates with you, Cal.
Big time. Just like I'm always trying, you can imagine as I've gone on this bit of a personal journey over these last 3 years, I've tried a bunch of shit and I've gotten excited about a lot of things because I see the potential and it's new and it's different and it's this and it's that. And largely in the beginning, I was met with passivity and just like not, and I didn't have a great way of articulating it because I just went without really knowing. I just felt like a calling to these different things, whether it was plant medicines or trying this or doing that. And it was any number of things. I'm like, yeah, I'll try it. Like it sounds like, there would be something in there for me to change my perspective or to give me more opportunities for growth, whatever it is. And for a long time, I didn't feel supported in it. So that was hard because I felt on an island and I'm trying these things and I'm excited about it and I'm learning stuff. And I didn't know how to share that because I didn't feel like I had a captive audience.
See, that's interesting because I would feel like you've tried many things throughout our relationship. And I was like, number one cheerleader. And I'd be like, okay, this is what we're doing now. Fluff the pom-poms. Let's go. So that's
I'd say
interesting.
more on the personal exploration. Yeah, just as I would,
more recently, is that what you're speaking?
Yeah, within the last couple of years. But I think, but I would say is in the last 6 months, you have been like open. I would say you've been open-minded and curious. You've been more curious rather than, what is it this time?
Well, I think
that was the energy I would get.
For sure.
What is it now?
But what I think I've realized, this
is what we're doing now is not a cheerleader to me.
No.
This is like a little
okay, but
patronizing.
interesting. Okay, that's great that you said that. But I also have realized.
You son of
Good. We're doing the work. That's why we're here.
Absolutely.
This is real time, folks.
Come on now.
Keeping it real. Is I realized what I was feeling is his exploration was a threat for me.
Right.
And so that tapped into that fear of like, oh, okay, so now is he going to leave me?
Sure.
And so that's what I had realized this over the past few years. It was like, how can I best support him so that we're in this great relationship and he doesn't leave me? And I didn't realize that a lot of the decisions and support I was giving was more fear-based in certain scenarios. And I think a lot with this new exploration, because there were some big changes, it felt as a threat.
I felt it was tolerated, not supported.
That's fair.
Yeah.
So the energy, the words didn't land for me.
And I tried. It's not that I didn't want to be supported. I think, I would try to talk myself into being supportive, which is probably why it felt not aligned. Because I was trying to get myself to a point of being supportive. But what I was feeling was scared.
Sure. No, and what you guys are communicating is, it's really fascinating how the language for each of you is so personal and so context driven, right? One of the phrases that I use with patients and families and when I'm teaching on this space is when fear goes up, cognition goes down. So the way the brain works is cognition is both thinking and feeling. So when you get into a survival-based space or you don't feel safe, as the stress or in a lot of people will go, well, I don't deal with fear. Great. That's not true, but I'll let's go with it. I don't have stress. That's great. Okay, it's not true, but I'll go with it. You can use the term inputs, okay? When your body is dealing with a stress, imagine that you're a restaurant that has too many tickets coming in, okay? Mm-hmm. You've overbooked the restaurant and you're making food in the background. You could be the happiest person in the planet making that food, but you've got too many tickets. And at some point, you're going to run out of resources. So as that goes up, once you eventually run out of resources and your brain deals with fatigue, when fear goes up, stress or workload goes up, eventually you'll have a law of diminishing returns and cognition goes down. The reason I say that is as you guys are even not navigating that conversation, oftentimes what happens for the brain is it wants somebody else to understand your context. And a lot of the times we can't even remember our own context because we were dealing with fear and stress in that space. So a really helpful thing that can sometimes shift when you're talking about the spaces that you were in is to go with the concept, right? Because conceptually, what Peyton's saying in that space was, I felt scared. I thought you might leave. I thought I might get abandoned. I don't know if you were loyal. I wasn't sure if everything was going to end up broken, right? And then Cal's saying, I didn't feel like there was peace in that space. I didn't feel like you were with me in that. It didn't feel like I had a captive audience. I don't feel like I was heard. It felt like there was some passive aggressiveness to it. It felt like the language didn't feel safe. Realistically, in both of those situations, you're talking about for some reason, relative to your own lived experience, you didn't feel safe conceptually. Then you go, okay, well, what about that didn't feel safe? Case in point, to connect you guys back to the Enneagram and the dialogue, your bottom numbers, and this is a big shift in Enneagram language, which you can tell your friend Mary Lou, this is one of my biggest hearts around this, okay? Because I'm so tired of people saying, what number are you? You're not a number. You're a human who has the capacity for all of this stuff. All 9 numbers are actively working in you. Knowing your highest numbers knows what you're actively working towards or pursuing them, because the more they exist on a daily basis, the more you feel safe. But if somebody introduces your bottom numbers, they will trigger you the fastest. And if you look at the example that you guys just gave, somebody in that space, being each other, had the potential of introducing potentially your bottom numbers in an unhealthy way. So for instance, you, Peyton, your bottom 3 numbers are 8, 6, and 1. 8 is conflict, if it's unhealthy, specifically relational conflict, because you're high in a relational space feeling. 6 is the idea of loyalty and commitment and integrity. And then 1 is the idea of things being fixed and stable and right. So if Cal is going on an adventure and your 2 is warring and your 7 is warring and your 9 is warring, you're saying, I want to celebrate you. I want to tell you to go for it. I want to just do whatever creates a modicum of peace in our relationship, because that's what I know at least I've got some probability of achieving. But what you're actually doing is moving out of a space that's triggered that says, this is going to end up being a stick of dynamite in our relationship. I'm going to lose the commitment in the relationship because you might leave. That's the 6, that's the loyalty. And then something's going to end up broken as a result of this, and I didn't do enough to fix it. Mm-hmm. So the top numbers are trying to reconcile the fear of the bottom numbers. They're collectively in relationship with each other, right? Does that make sense?
It does.
So it's saying that you're trying to look at it, and somebody would normally say, well, you know what it is? You're just not working through reconciling your neediness as a 2. 1, that's really patronizing and makes me want to start just cursing at somebody. It's like, don't trivialize the human experience of being in a dynamic with a person for 2 decades and trying to comprehensively understand what it is that you're wrestling with as a human. That's not fair. But when you look at it and go, okay, what's the whole narrative here? What's the biggest? I don't feel safe. Is it because he interfered with your ability to be appreciated long enough for him to stay at home with you? That you're the adventure that can be pursued in that space and you guys can be excited without having to elope somewhere else outside of your zip code? Or is it that the idea of a lost relationship and abandonment came in and that triggers history for you? Or is it that something's going to end up broken and you're trying your best just to fix it and to heal it? Like, there's different spaces, right?
Sure.
But then if you look at Cal,
I'm trying to break shit.
Yeah, that's exactly it. The 8 is like, don't worry. If it's supposed to survive, it'll survive.
Yes.
Right? Let's, you know what? I got an idea. That dude who jumped out of the airplane without a parachute and was the first guy to jump out of an airplane and do a skydive without a parachute, that's me in general. We've figured out. Get a net big enough. It doesn't matter how long the free fall is. I'll be fine. If I'm not, well, you know, we went out on a high note. Okay. It's like, that's understandable. So if you look at those spaces, I think one way to really distill it, because for the sake of time, I don't want to fatigue your audience. But what you guys talked about in that space, this is where we come back to the gas, cruise, and brake, the relative relationship to heart rate. One of the fascinating things in science now is heart rate variability, right? Like how much is healthy for you. For Cal, hitting the gas pedal and having your heart rate spike and having those swings and having that high heart rate feels life-giving. So to slow down, to find an equilibrium, or even to lower your heart rate for an extended period of time is going to take work. That's why it's taken so much mindfulness, so much meditation, so much experiences with what you've gone through, because it's taken an active, intentional, concerted effort to get your heart rate to stay low for a longer period of time, because it wasn't natural. So when you're in a space saying, hey, I got a new idea, and Peyton comes in and goes, not yet, it slams the brake on the part of your brain that goes, so does my heart rate have to go down? Because I don't want my heart rate to go down. I feel good when my heart rate is up. And then Peyton's in a situation going, I'm not really inclined for my heart rate to be at 90 all day. It doesn't feel good for me. Like, I'm okay with it every once in a while, but consistently being up, that's not what I'm here for. I prefer a sense of equilibrium or rest, or at least something that feels consistent, where if it happens, it just doesn't happen for an extended period of time. So those sort of spaces are kind of an easy way to look at it and go, man, I just really like being a gas pedal. Why is it so hard for me not to be that? No matter how well practiced I am, I'm just not inclined to it. And that's okay, but it's important for me to be aware of it. And for Peyton to go, I'm not inclined to be a gas pedal. I don't want to burn out. I don't want to burn through all of our fuel. In fact, I'm trying to make sure that we have enough resources to survive the next 10 or 20 years. If we go too fast, we may not. So when she reins it in, it's a safety mechanism. When you speed it up, it's a safety mechanism. So being able to step back and go, is that true? Is it going to eat me if I don't take the next trip? Is it going to kill me if I don't take the next trip? Is it going to be life-threatening? Or am I reconciling with bigger conversations around why do I feel the need to so consistently drive and to break stuff? And why do I feel the need so consistently to say things have to slow down for me to feel safe? And you have to be present in order for me to feel safe. Is that true? And if it is, having an honest conversation about that being true is very different than having a confused conversation around what feels true when you're fearful. Because when fear goes up, cognition goes down. Does that make sense?
Beautiful.
I know we just went through a lot, and for anybody who's stuck with us, congratulations. You have built some stamina. Well done.
Well, and I really appreciate, Dr. Jerome, that you know, it's very easy to kind of celebrate these, you know, the attributes of your parts of the Enneagram, but I'm going to use appreciated again.
Yes,
I really
good
appreciated
language.
how you talked about the parts are the reasons maybe why I would be triggered by certain things, because I think often when we do these personality trait type tests, we only look at the ones that we would align more positively or ones that more support our perception of self, as opposed to the ones that challenge our perception of self. And I think it's so important to look at all of that to understand your why and how we can grow in having that awareness. And so I think that was so powerful and important that you discussed that as well.
Thank you. And I think that's, you know, for me, the biggest thing to wrap up with what you're saying, Cal, and Ty, and what you just mentioned, Peyton. And I specialize in complex unresolved cases. People who come in here have seen an average of 24 specialists, spend 100 to 150 grand. They're really hurting. And the reality is that plenty of people have thrown something at them that goes, well, this is the most likely thing to work because what you've got as a resource. And oftentimes nobody's really looking at that nuanced piece where they're hemorrhaging resources and just plugging the hole in a boat. Right? Sometimes the most helpful thing you can do is go, where's a really viable space that we can shore things up? Where's a really great opportunity to not reinforce a strength, but alone to do that, but go through a SWOT analysis. Like do the basics of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. A really comprehensive, we've done it in all of these business spaces that we've lived in for the last 30 years. Like, it's really important to do a both and then some. Leverage your strengths. That's awesome. Those are great resources. Celebrate that. Don't forget there's weaknesses, there's opportunities, and there's legitimately threats. Sure. So to answer your question, Cal, I think one of the things that can be helpful for folks, 2 simple recommendations. One is when you take the READY test, which is RHETI. I don't get anything from them. I'm not affiliated. I absolutely love the work that Russ Hudson does, which is where the Enneagram Institute is based. I think it's the most reliable when you look at it through this whole identity profile. Okay. But when you take the READY, go to the EnneagramInstitute.com, and for your top 3 numbers, especially any number that's over 20, like for you, Peyton, it's 2 and 7. For you, Cal, it's 3, 8, 8, 3, and 7. Your top 3 numbers, but especially any that's over 20. You go to the Enneagram Institute, look at the type descriptions, scroll all the way to the bottom of the page, and read the section that says personal growth recommendations. You don't have to understand everything that I've said. You don't have to understand neuroscience, to break the cruise. Just go for the easy, low-hanging fruit. Cherry pick the personal growth recommendation that jumps out to you, because every single person that I know that takes their top 3 numbers and reads those personal growth recommendations, something will jump out on that page that is so obvious and so evident that it's not new information. It's a reminder that's really revelational, because they're like, you know what? I'm in the space where that finally resonates. It finally sinks in. But you can get that off the personal growth recommendation. The other simple thing is I created a whole series of YouTube videos for free during coronavirus, because a lot of people were like, we just don't have funds to even buy anything. And I'm allergic to self-promotion, so I don't tell a lot of people like where to find my stuff.
Well, we're going to promote your ass,
you.
so you don't have to worry about yourself.
I'll leave that to my brothers who are high in 7-8, and you guys are both high in 7-8. It's fine.
Oh, you better get some staff.
Yeah, it's okay. I learned a long time ago. I'm just going to love on people. I'm going to appreciate them because I'm high too. And then if they want to share it, because I'm 100% referral practice with a 10-week wait list, it's like, I don't need to promote anything. If you guys love it, you'll do it. But one of the things that's helpful is to have a longer conversation where it's slowed down and it's not as accelerated as the podcast and it's not as long. So if you go to YouTube and you just Google my name, or not Google, just look in YouTube, Dr. Jerome Lubbe, Lubbe. There's a YouTube page that has about 20 different videos that go over each type in terms of what's called high and low expressions. So one that I would actually watch for you guys together as an example is Kyle's really high in 8, and then Peyton's lower in 8. So if you watch just the 8 video, it'll say this is how you show up if it's high, and this is actually how it's allergic for you if you're low. And then you can have the same video be contextual for both of you, right? Mm-hmm. But those videos are all free on YouTube, and they help to explain things a little bit better. So if you're high in a number, it'll give you context. If you're low in a number, it'll give you context as well. And then you look at the high numbers and say, what are some personal growth recommendations that are already really well framed out for me? Because I understood maybe gas, brake, and cruise, but the rest of it, he lost me. Then those can be some helpful on-ramps to go. And there's so much beauty and so much complexity to the way that the human being is made, that I would just give yourself an on-ramp that's relative to your highest numbers and then go from there.
Amazing. And we'll link to all this in the show notes. So you'll have that, and we'll link to your book. Where can people find you in particular?
Yeah. Easiest way is drjerome.com, which is DRJEROME. It shows 3 different places. One is my clinic site. The other one is the Whole Identity, which is a brain-based Enneagram. Then I have a whole nother world called Thrive Neurotheology, which is the intersection between spirituality that's not faith specific, but spirituality and neuroscience. So that landing page, Dr. Jerome, will take you to all of those different websites.
Awesome. And then for those of you who know that I'm doing, or maybe you don't know, but I'm doing this, the Unlearn Experience, which is an intentional brotherhood. Dr. Jerome is going to be one of our guest experts early on in the experience. And so if you're called to this work, you can reach out to him and get your own work done, you and your partner, or you can also join us at the next one because we're sold out now, but we'll be running another one, hopefully sometime end of the year, beginning of 2021. And I'll have to bribe Dr. Jerome to come back and run that back with us. But I don't know, Pei, do you have any closing thoughts?
I wanted to give a shout out to my dear friend, Juliana Bootsman of White Box Leadership, who introduced the Enneagram to me a couple of years ago. And just many thanks to you, Dr. Jerome, for your time and your love and your tenderness today.
I told you you're going to love him.
I know you do.
Right? It's hard to, I know he's a doctor, but he's not, he's like spiritually, he's got the whole thing. You're going to love his energy.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And thanks to Ty Ward for connecting us. Well, awesome, Doc.
It's great being with you guys. Thank you for the opportunity and for the folks who are listening, and thank you for the presence in the space to be with you as well.
Got it. We'll be in touch soon.
Thanks, brother. Much love.